3 months passed since Daniel Green's arrival at Nexus Prime. His office inside the Earth section of the station had become something unusual in diplomatic circles. Busy. A steady stream of representatives from various species came to meet, with the human ambassador, something almost unheard of for a Category 5 species. "Ambassador, the Eridani delegation is here again," said Olivia Martinez, Daniel's assistant who had arrived from Earth 2 weeks after him. She was organizing data on a holographic display, mapping connections between species, political alliances, and historical conflicts. "Send them in, please," Daniel replied, straightening his uniform jacket. The blue-furred Eridani entered with their characteristic short, quick steps. "Ambassador Green, the first shipments of the drought-resistant seeds have arrived. Our agricultural experts are amazed at their adaptability." Daniel smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear it, Ambassador Kier. Earth is happy to help." "The Krelnath have taken credit for the program," the Eridani added, whiskers twitching with what Daniel had learned was amusement. "They've made several announcements about their generous oversight of the project." "Exactly as expected," Daniel nodded. "And that's perfectly fine. The important thing is that your people are getting the help they need." After the Eridani left, Olivia brought up another holographic display. "That's the 7th lower category species we've established relations with. The pattern is working." Daniel studied the network diagram she had created. Lines connected Earth to various species that traditional Confederation politics would have kept separate. "What's the latest on the Drakari situation?" he asked. Olivia's expression grew serious. "Not good. Their ships have been detected near the Taldaris sector border. The Confederation Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss the threat." The Drakari Empire was the looming shadow over all Confederation politics, an aggressive expansionist power that had refused to join the Confederation and instead built their own domain through conquest. Rumors of their ships approaching Confederation space had everyone on edge. "And how are the Krelnath and Altheans positioning themselves?" Daniel asked. "The same as in the last 3 meetings," Olivia replied. "They're pushing for a policy of minimal response, essentially giving up the outer systems to avoid direct conflict. Outer systems that just happen to belong mainly to Category 5 through 8 species," Daniel noted. "Including our new colony on Baituai. Elysium," the door chimed, interrupting their conversation. Surgathar entered without waiting for a response. The Vexeri liaison had grown increasingly agitated as Daniel's influence expanded. "Ambassador Green," Zakthar said, his scales rippling with barely contained frustration. "The Krelnath ambassador has filed a formal complaint about Earth's activities." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "What activities would those be?" "Improper fraternization across category boundaries. Disruption of established protocols. Unofficial coalition building." Zikathar listed the complaints rapidly. "Ambassador Krelval specifically mentioned your persistent smiling as a form of aggressive posturing." Daniel couldn't help but let his smile widen at that last part. "Is making friends now against Confederation rules, Officer Zakathar?" "You know perfectly well what you're doing," the Vexeri replied. "The hierarchical system has maintained peace for over 700 cycles." "Has it," Daniel asked quietly, "or has it just maintained a very specific kind of order, one that benefits some species more than others?" Zikthar's vertical pupils narrowed. "You were warned when you arrived not to involve yourself in matters beyond Earth's direct concerns." "But that's just it," Daniel said, standing up from his desk. "Everything happening in the Confederation concerns Earth, especially now with the Drakari threat. We're newcomers, yes, but we have a right to security like everyone else." After Zikathar left, clearly unsatisfied with the conversation, Olivia pulled up a new display. "The representatives from the Lorani, Eridani, and Volux have all confirmed. They'll vote against the Krelnath proposal tomorrow," she said. "That's 9 species now." Daniel nodded. "Still not enough to defeat the measure, but enough to show significant opposition. The higher categories aren't used to that." The next day, Daniel entered the Grand Council chamber, an enormous circular room with tiered seating. As expected, the Category 1-3 species occupied the lowest tier closest to the speaking floor. Categories 4 to 6 sat in the middle, while the highest numbered, lowest-ranked species were relegated to the back rows. Daniel took his assigned seat among the other Category 5 representatives, but noticed something different today. Representatives from several species nodded to him or made their species-equivalent gestures of recognition. A subtle shift, but meaningful. The Krelnath ambassador Gorvik stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he outlined the proposed response to the Drakari incursions. The stability of the Confederation must be our priority, Gorvik's amplified voice echoed through the chamber. The outer systems can be temporarily conceded as a buffer zone while we strengthen our core defenses. Daniel listened carefully, making notes on his tablet. The proposal would essentially abandon 27 colony worlds, including Earth's Elysium settlement, in hopes that sacrificing them would satisfy the Drakari Empire's hunger for expansion. When the voting began, it proceeded predictably at first. The Category 1-3 species all voted in favor of the proposal. Then came the first surprise. The Volux territories vote against, announced their representative, causing a ripple of murmurs. The Eridani Collective votes against, came another voice. One by one, species that had traditionally followed the higher categories' lead began voting against the proposal. By the time the voting reached the final tier, the outcome was still assured. The proposal would pass. But the margin was the narrowest in recent Confederation history. After the session concluded, Daniel found himself cornered in a corridor by Ambassador Gorvik. The tall Krelnath loomed over him, all four arms held stiffly at his sides. "This disruption to proceedings was your doing," Gorvik said, his translator barely softening the harsh tones. Daniel maintained his diplomatic smile. "Every representative votes according to the interests of their species, Ambassador. That's how democracy works." "The Confederation is not a democracy," Gorvik hissed. "It is a hierarchical meritocracy where those with greater achievements and power guide those with less." "Perhaps it's time for some new ideas," Daniel suggested mildly. "After all, those outer systems you're so ready to abandon are home to millions of sentient beings." The Krelnath leaned closer. "You humans have been in space for barely a moment, yet you presume to change systems that have functioned for centuries. Your Category 5 status is generous given your limited capabilities." Daniel's smile never faltered. "We're still learning, Ambassador, but one thing humans are particularly good at is making friends." "Friends?" Gorvik scoffed. "Those lower category species can do nothing to protect you or themselves." "Maybe not individually," Daniel agreed. "But together? That's a different equation." As Gorvik stormed away, Olivia approached from where she had been waiting nearby. "That went well," she remarked dryly. Daniel watched the Krelnath's retreating form. "Phase 2 is working. Now we need to prepare for what happens when the Drakari reject their offer. Because they will." "You're sure?" Olivia asked. Daniel nodded, his expression growing serious for once. "I've studied enough of their expansion pattern. They view concessions as weakness. The Krelnath are about to learn that giving bullies what they want never makes them go away." As they walked back to the Earth section, Daniel noticed more representatives acknowledging him. The diplomatic landscape was shifting, alliances forming in new patterns. The old order was beginning to crack, and everyone on Nexus Prime could feel it. The massive space station Nexus Prime hung against the backdrop of stars like a gleaming spiderweb, made of metal and light. Daniel Green stared out the viewport of the small transport shuttle as it approached. 5 interconnected rings rotated, slowly around a central hub, housing representatives from over 200 species that formed the Galactic Confederation. "First time seeing it?" asked the shuttle pilot, noticing Daniel's wide eyes. "Yes," Daniel replied, straightening his navy, diplomatic uniform. "It's quite something." The pilot, a blue-skinned Andraxian with 4 arms, nodded. "You'll get used to it, maybe. Some species never do." Daniel doubted he would ever get used to such a marvel of engineering. Only 3 years had passed since first contact, when the Vexeri scout ship landed outside Portland. Now humanity was taking its first tentative steps into galactic politics, and Daniel had been chosen as Earth's chief diplomat. The shuttle docked with a soft thud. Daniel gathered his simple luggage and stepped through the airlock. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth's, and the air carried unfamiliar scents. A tall, reptilian figure waited in the reception area. Its scales shimmered between green and gold when it moved, and vertical pupils studied Daniel with unblinking intensity. "Ambassador Green of Earth," the reptilian being said, its translator converting a series of clicks and hisses into smooth English. "I am Officer Zakthar of the Vexeri Diplomatic Corps, assigned as your liaison." Daniel extended his hand, then remembered the briefing about Vexeri customs and quickly pulled it back. Instead, he offered a small bow. "Thank you for meeting me, Officer Zakthar. I look forward to working together." The Vexeri blinked once, slowly. "Follow me. I will show you to your quarters and brief you on protocol." As they walked through the bustling corridors, Daniel observed dozens of different species. Some looked almost human with minor differences, while others defied description. Floating gas clouds contained in environmental suits, crystalline beings that clicked as they moved, and creatures that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. "The Confederation operates on a clear hierarchical system," Zakthar explained as they walked. "Species are classified by technological advancement, military power, and territorial holdings. Earth has been classified as Category 5. "Out of how many?" Daniel asked. 10. The Vexeri's voice remained flat. "You will be expected to show proper deference to representatives of higher-ranking species, particularly Categories 1 through 3. The Krell-Nath, Altheans, and my own people, the Vexeri, hold Category 2 status." Daniel nodded. "And what does proper deference entail?" "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact first. Always yield in corridors. Address them by full title. Never contradict them publicly." Zakthar listed the rules without pause. "Most importantly, do not involve yourself in matters that do not directly concern Earth." Daniel smiled. "I'll do my best to represent Earth's interests while respecting Confederation customs." Zakathar's scales rippled in what Daniel guessed might be discomfort. "Your facial expression, the baring of teeth. Many species find it threatening." "This?" Daniel's smile widened slightly. "On Earth, it's called a smile. It's a sign of friendliness." "Fascinating," Zakthar replied, though he sounded more disturbed than fascinated. "Perhaps consider limiting this smiling during official functions." They arrived at Daniel's quarters, a modest but comfortable room with adjustable environmental controls and a view of the central hub. After Zakthar left, Daniel unpacked his few belongings and studied the station map on his tablet. He had 6 hours before the welcome reception, time enough to learn the layout of the diplomatic sector. The reception hall buzzed with activity when Daniel arrived that evening. Creatures of all descriptions mingled in groups that, he noticed, seemed determined by their category rankings. Servers moved smoothly between clusters, offering foods and drinks suitable for various biologies. Daniel stood near the entrance, observing the interactions and trying to match species to the descriptions he had memorized during the journey from Earth. He noticed a group of tall, 4-armed beings with iridescent skin standing in the center of the room. Other species gave them a wide berth. "The Krell-Nath delegation," a soft voice said beside him. Daniel turned to see a petite, plant-like being with green-tinged skin and delicate fronds instead of hair. Category 2 and quite aware of their importance. "I'm Nivi, Lorani Ambassador, Category 6. "Daniel Green Earth, apparently Category 5, he replied with a warm smile. "Pleased to meet you." The Lorani's fronds quivered slightly. "You're either very brave or very new to smile so openly here." Before Daniel could respond, a commotion arose from the center of the room. The Krell-Nath delegates had surrounded a small, nervous-looking representative with pale blue fur. "Your species' request for aid is denied," one of the Krell-Nath boomed, voice translating through the room's systems. "Perhaps if the Eridani contributed anything of value to the Confederation, we might consider it." The blue-furred diplomat trembled. But the drought has devastated our agriculture. We just need temporary food supplies. Then perhaps you should have developed better agricultural technology. Another Krellnath cut in. Category 7 species must learn self-sufficiency. Daniel watched the exchange with growing concern. Beside him, Nivi whispered, "This happens often. No one intervenes." Without thinking further, Daniel walked toward the group, stopping at a respectful distance but clearly intending to join the conversation. The Krellnath noticed him immediately. Earth's new representative, the tallest one said, looking down at Daniel. "Come to observe how the Confederation works?" Daniel smiled his most pleasant. "Ambassador Krellval, I believe? I've read so much about your species' achievements. Truly impressive." The Krellnath straightened, clearly pleased by the flattery. "At least some lower categories know their place. You may observe." "Thank you," Daniel said, still smiling. "I was particularly interested in your discussion about agricultural aid. Earth recently developed drought-resistant crops that might help the Eridani situation. We're only Category 5, of course, but perhaps we could offer this technology through proper channels?" With the Krellnath overseeing the project naturally, the Krellnath delegates exchanged glances. The blue-furred Eridani looked at Daniel with shocked hope. "That would be considered," Krellval said slowly. "Submit the proposal through your liaison." "Wonderful," Daniel replied, his smile never wavering. "I believe it would reflect well on the Krellnath's legendary generosity if you were associated with such aid." After a moment of silence, the Krellnath delegation moved away, their previous aggression diffused. The Eridani representative approached Daniel with wide eyes. "No one has ever—" "How did you—" Daniel shrugged. "Just a friendly conversation." Later that evening, Zakathar cornered Daniel near the refreshment table. "What did you do?" The Vexeri demanded. "The Krellnath ambassador is asking questions about Earth's agricultural technology." "I just smiled and had a chat," Daniel said innocently. "You interfered in a matter that didn't concern Earth," Zakathar hissed, "and now the Krellnath are focused on you. This attention is dangerous." Daniel looked across the room, where several diplomats now glanced in his direction with curious expressions. Some appeared concerned, others intrigued. The Eridani representative was speaking animatedly to a group of other lower category species, occasionally pointing toward Daniel. "Perhaps," Daniel said, his smile returning. "But it seems we've made some friends too." Zikathar's scales rippled with agitation. "You humans clearly don't understand galactic politics. That smile will get you into trouble." Daniel watched as Krellval studied him from across the room with narrowed eyes. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe it's exactly what the Confederation needs." The emergency alert siren blared throughout Nexus Prime, its wailing tone cutting through the usual hum of station activity. Daniel rushed into the main command center, where representatives from various species gathered around holographic displays showing real-time updates from the outer systems. "What's happening?" Daniel asked as he joined Olivia at one of the terminals. Her face was pale as she pointed to the display. The Drakari rejected the Confederation's offer. They've launched attacks on multiple border worlds simultaneously. The holographic map showed red warning indicators flashing across a dozen star systems. One name made Daniel's heart sink: Elysium, Earth's first and only colony world beyond the solar system. "Casualty reports?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "Still coming in," Olivia replied. "Communications are spotty. The Drakari hit the relay stations first." Across the room, Ambassador Gorvik and other high-ranking species representatives huddled in urgent discussion. Their body language, even across diverse physiologies, conveyed shock and confusion. "They weren't expecting this," Daniel observed, quietly. "They genuinely thought the Drakari would accept their offering and stop." An aide rushed up to Daniel with a datapad. "Ambassador Green, urgent communication from Earth Command." Daniel reviewed the message, his expression growing grimmer. "The settlement on Elysium is under heavy bombardment. Earth is dispatching the defense fleet. but they'll take at least 3 days to arrive at full strength. Can they do that? Olivia asked. I thought all military actions had to be approved by the Confederation Council. That's about to become a topic of heated debate, Daniel said, watching as several representatives began pointing in his direction. Cathar approached rapidly, scales shifting between dark green and black, a sign of extreme agitation that Daniel had learned to recognize. Your planet is mobilizing military forces without council authorization, the Vexeri stated. This is a severe breach of protocol. Daniel met his gaze steadily. People are dying, Officer Zakthar. Earth will not abandon its citizens while waiting for the Council to debate the proper response procedures. The Council is convening an emergency session in 1 hour, Zukathar said. Ambassador Gorvik insists on your presence. As the Vexeri walked away, Olivia moved closer to Daniel. I've been reviewing the communication logs like you asked, she whispered. Something doesn't add up. What did you find? Daniel asked. There were encrypted transmissions between the Krelnath diplomatic vessel and an unidentified ship at the edge of Confederation space 3 days ago. The timing matches with the last known location of a Drakari scout. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Can you verify it? Not with absolute certainty, but the pattern is consistent with previous recorded Drakari communication signatures. Keep digging, Daniel instructed. I need solid evidence before I can make any accusations. The emergency council session was chaotic by Confederation standards. Representatives spoke over each other, a rare breach of the usual strict hierarchical speaking order. The massive council chamber, normally organized and formal, now buzzed with fear and confusion. Ambassador Gorvik took the central podium. Order! We must maintain order. His amplified voice eventually quieted the room. The Drakari aggression is unfortunate but not unexpected. This is why we propose the creation of a buffer zone. A buffer zone that has failed to buffer anything, Daniel called out from his seat, drawing shocked looks for speaking out of turn. Gorvik's forearms tensed. The human representative will observe proper protocol. Earth's unauthorized military mobilization is itself an act that undermines Confederation unity at this critical time. Daniel stood. With respect, Ambassador, Earth is responding to a direct attack on its citizens. The Confederation's policy of appeasement has failed. Now we need action, not more discussion. Your species has barely joined interstellar society, Gorvik replied dismissively. You cannot comprehend the complexities of... Daniel's communication device buzzed urgently. He glanced down to see a message from Olivia. Got it. Proof of Krelnath Drakari communication. Come now. Ambassador Gorvik, Daniel interrupted. I request a brief recess to consult with my staff on urgent developments. Denied, the Krelnath replied flatly. This council will proceed with, I have information relevant to the Drakari attacks, Daniel insisted, his voice carrying through the chamber. Many representatives turned to look at him with interest. After a moment of visible frustration, Gorvik conceded, a 30-minute recess, no more. Daniel rushed back to the Earth section where Olivia waited with several holographic displays open. Look at this, she said, pointing to a series of transmission logs. The Krelnath weren't just communicating. With the Drakari, they were negotiating. Daniel studied the decoded message fragments. They promised specific systems in exchange for the Drakari avoiding Krelnath territory entirely. And there's more, Olivia added, bringing up another display. They've been doing this for years. Each time the Drakari expand, the Krelnath and Altheans redirect them toward lower category species territories. Daniel's usually present smile had vanished entirely. Make copies of everything. I'm going back to the council. When Daniel returned to the council chamber, he brought Olivia with him. Another breach of protocol, as assistants weren't typically allowed during emergency sessions. Before Gorvik could resume, Daniel walked directly to the speaking podium. Representatives of the Confederation, he began, ignoring the outraged sputtering from Gorvik. I have evidence that demands your immediate attention. With a nod to Olivia, the transmission logs were displayed on the main chamber screens. A collective gasp echoed through the room. These are records of secret communications between the Krellnath Diplomatic Corps and Drakari commanders, Daniel explained, his voice hard and clear. For years, certain high-ranking species have been redirecting Drakari aggression away from their own territories by suggesting easier targets, specifically worlds belonging to lower-category species. Gorvik surged forward. This is fabrication. Slander. The evidence has already been transmitted to every delegation's secure channel. Daniel continued calmly. Your own encryption keys were used, Ambassador Gorvik. Unless someone stole them, there's only one explanation. The council erupted into shouting and movement. Representatives from the lower category species were on their feet, many directing angry gestures toward the Krellnath delegation. This changes nothing about Earth's unauthorized military actions, Gorvik insisted, though his voice had lost its commanding tone. It changes everything, Daniel replied. He turned to address the entire council. For too long, this confederation has operated, under the pretense that the hierarchical system serves all. Today we see the truth. It primarily serves those at the top while sacrificing those deemed less important. Daniel finally allowed himself to smile, but it wasn't the warm, diplomatic smile he usually wore. This expression made several nearby representatives take an instinctive step back. Earth proposes an immediate vote of no confidence in the current council leadership and the formation of an emergency defense coalition open to all species, regardless of category. The chamber exploded into noise again. But through the chaos, Daniel could see representatives from dozens of species, those he had been quietly building relationships with over the past months, nodding their agreement. Gorvik pushed his way through the crowd until he stood face to face with Daniel. You have no idea what you've done, he hissed, translator struggling to capture his tone. This structure has maintained peace for centuries. Peace for some, Daniel corrected, his smile unwavering. At the expense of others. That ends today. Voting procedures began across the chamber. Gorvik stared at Daniel with a new emotion visible in his alien features. Fear. You humans? The Krellnath said quietly, with your smiles and friendly words. We thought you harmless. Daniel's smile widened just slightly. That was your first mistake. The days following the emergency council session transformed Nexus Prime. The once strictly organized station now buzzed with a new energy, as species that had previously kept to their assigned sectors now moved freely, meeting and planning together. The Earth section had become the unofficial headquarters of what was being called the Defense Coalition. Daniel sat at the head of a large table surrounded by representatives from 27 species. Holographic displays showed the current positions of Drakari forces and the status of the worlds under attack. The situation on Elysium has stabilized, reported Captain Samantha Wright of the Earth ship Intrepid. Her holographic image flickered slightly from the long-distance transmission. Our defense fleet arrived in time to prevent a full-scale ground invasion, but 3 settlement domes were destroyed. We have approximately 2,000 casualties. Daniel nodded grimly. What about the other attacked worlds? The Lorani homeworld is holding, but barely, said Nevi, the plant-like diplomat who had been one of Daniel's first allies. The Eridani colony on Vesh Prime has fallen. The Volix mining outpost at Zeta 7 is under heavy bombardment. We need to coordinate our defense efforts, Daniel said. What military assets can each member of the coalition contribute? The answers came quickly, though individually, none of the represented species had significant military power. Together they formed a substantial force. Some offered ships, others ground troops. Some had advanced sensor technology, others specialized in medical support or supply logistics. Earth Command has authorized me to offer our full fleet capabilities, Daniel told the group. Though we're new to interstellar travel, we've maintained strong defensive capabilities. A reptilian representative from the Saurak Confederation leaned forward. Forgive my directness, Ambassador Green, but this is surprising. The assessment provided when Earth joined the Confederation indicated your species had limited space combat capabilities. Daniel smiled. That assessment may have been incomplete, Murmurs spread around the table as Daniel nodded to Olivia, who brought up new holographic displays showing Earth's actual military fleet. The images showed sleek, heavily armed vessels quite different from the transport and scientific ships Earth had previously acknowledged. "You deliberately downplayed your military strength," observed Zakthar, who had surprised everyone by attending the coalition meeting. "A basic precaution when entering an unknown political situation," Daniel replied. "Earth learned long ago not to show all its cards at once." "Cards?" asked a confused Eridani representative. "An Earth expression," Daniel explained. "It means not revealing all your capabilities immediately." Before further discussion could continue, an alarm sounded. A communications officer rushed into the room. "The Drakari fleet has been detected entering the Nerillian system," she announced. "They've bypassed our outer defenses." Nerillian Prime was a key junction world connecting multiple trade routes. If it fell, the Drakari would have a clear path to a dozen more populated systems. "How long until they reach the planet?" Daniel asked. 6 hours at their current speed." Daniel turned to the assembled representatives. "This is the moment to put our coalition to the test. Can we deploy within 4 hours?" Captain Wright's hologram nodded firmly. "The Intrepid and 3 other Earth vessels can rendezvous at Nerillian in 3 hours. We'll need support." One by one, the coalition members committed their forces. Ships that had never fought together would now form a united defensive line. "Captain Wright will coordinate the space defense," Daniel said. "The Lorani sensor vessels will provide tactical data. The Volux mining ships have been retrofitted with shield generators and will protect the evacuation transports if needed." As the meeting broke up with representatives rushing to contact their commands, Zakthar remained behind with Daniel. "This coalition has no official Confederation sanction," the Vexeri said. "We're well past worrying about official sanctions," Daniel replied. "People are dying while the Krelnath and their allies debate proper procedures." Zakathar's scales rippled in what Daniel had come to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. "The high-category species are alarmed by your actions. They see this as a power grab. They see any change to the status quo as a threat," Daniel countered. "But the Drakari don't care about Confederation categories. They're coming for all of us, eventually." "The Krelnath are saying that humans planned this from the beginning," Zikathar said. "That you deliberately misrepresented your capabilities and intentions when joining the Confederation." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think, Officer Zakthar?" The Vexeri was silent for a long moment before answering. "I think the Confederation needed disruption. The system had become rigid." Daniel smiled, the expression softer than the one he had shown Gorvik. "Coming from a Vexeri, that's quite an admission." "Don't push your luck, human," Zakathar replied. But Daniel detected a note of humor in the translated voice. 4 hours later, Daniel and dozens of other representatives gathered in the central command hub of Nexus Prime to monitor the battle at Nerillian Prime. The enormous display screen showed the positions of coalition forces in blue and the approaching Drakari fleet in red. "The Drakari fleet outnumbers ours 3-1, reported the tactical officer. "They're maintaining attack formation." "Where are the Krelnath and Althean defense forces?" asked a Lorani representative. Olivia checked her datapad. "Still at their home systems. They've made no move to assist." On the main screen, the red dots of the Drakari fleet drew closer to the blue coalition formation. Captain Wright's voice came through the communication system. "Coalition vessels, maintain formation. Eridani sensor ships, activate jamming protocols. On my mark. Earth vessels, prepare main weapons. Lorani light cruisers, stand by for rapid deployment." Daniel watched as the fleets engaged. The coalition ships moved with surprising coordination for forces that had never worked together before. The Earth vessels revealed weapons systems far more advanced than what most Confederation species had expected, firing precise energy bursts that disabled rather than destroyed the Drakari ships when possible. "The Volux shield generators are holding," reported a technician. "Evacuation transports are away from the surface." For 2 tense hours the battle continued. The coalition forces took losses, but they held the line. The Drakari, clearly expecting less organized resistance, finally began to pull back. A cheer erupted in the command center as the red dots on the display retreated from Nerillian space. Representatives embraced or made their species equivalent. Gestures of celebration. "They did it," Olivia said quietly beside Daniel. "The coalition actually worked." Daniel nodded, watching as representatives who had barely acknowledged each other weeks ago now celebrated together. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The real fight comes next." "The Drakari?" Olivia asked. "No," Daniel replied, looking across the room where a group of higher category representatives observed the celebrations with visible concern. "The fight to change the Confederation itself." Ambassador Gorvik stood among them, his forearms crossed tightly across his chest. When he noticed Daniel watching, the Krelnath diplomat's expression darkened. "You've upset the natural order," Gorvik said as he approached. "Centuries of stability thrown into chaos by human meddling." Daniel's smile returned. "Not chaos, Ambassador. Evolution. The Confederation needed to adapt or it would have eventually collapsed under the Drakari attacks. Attacks you helped direct toward those you considered expendable. You have no proof that would stand in a formal inquiry," Gorvik said, though with less confidence than before. "Perhaps not," Daniel agreed. "But we have something more powerful now. A coalition that has tasted success, species that were kept apart by artificial boundaries now fighting together for mutual survival." Gorvik stared at the celebration around them. "And what happens when the immediate threat passes? This coalition of yours has no foundation in Confederation law. Then perhaps," Daniel said, his smile unwavering, "it's time to write new laws." 6 months after the Battle of Nerillian Prime, Nexus Prime space station looked vastly different. The rigid divisions between sectors had been replaced with open corridors. Representatives of all categories now moved freely through areas once reserved for only the highest-ranked species. In the central hub, a new circular council chamber had been constructed, with seats arranged not in hierarchical tiers but in a simple circle. Daniel Green stood at the observation deck, looking out at the stars and the ships coming and going from the station. Earth vessels now docked regularly alongside those of other species, no longer segregated to the outer docking rings. "Admiring your handiwork?" asked a familiar voice. Daniel turned to see Zakthar approaching. The Vexaries' scales had a calm blue-green sheen that Daniel had rarely seen in their early interactions. "Just taking it all in one last time," Daniel replied. "So the rumors are true. You're returning to Earth." Daniel nodded. "Ambassador John Rivera arrives tomorrow to take over as Earth's representative. The Confederation won't be the same without you," Zakthar said, surprising Daniel with the sentiment. "It's hardly the same Confederation I arrived at a year ago," Daniel observed. "How are your people adjusting to the new arrangement?" The Vexari made a gesture that Daniel had learned was equivalent to a shrug. "Change is difficult for Vexari. We value order and structure, but even the most traditional elders have acknowledged that the new system has advantages." The new system was what many now called the Green Reforms, the complete restructuring of the Confederation's political framework. The strict category rankings had been replaced with a representative council, where contribution and cooperation determined influence, not historical status or military might. "And the Krelnath?" Daniel asked. "I haven't seen Ambassador Gorvik lately." Recalled to his homeworld, Zakthar replied. "The evidence of their collusion with the Drakari caused significant internal political disruption. Their new ambassador arrives next week." Daniel smiled. "Let me guess, they'll be sending someone known for their diplomatic flexibility?" "Indeed," Zakthar said, with what Daniel now recognized as the Vexari version of amusement. "Someone specifically trained in human diplomatic customs, I'm told." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as a Lorani vessel glided past the observation window, escorted by an Earth defense ship. The alliance that had begun as an emergency measure had evolved into lasting cooperation. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Zakthar said finally. "From the very beginning when you first arrived, was this the plan all along?" Did Earth send you specifically to disrupt our system? Daniel considered the question carefully. Not exactly. Earth sent me to represent our interests and ensure our security. But humans have always been uncomfortable with rigid hierarchies that aren't based on merit or contribution. And the military capabilities you concealed? A standard precaution, Daniel explained. Earth has a long history of conflicts. We've learned not to show all our strengths until we understand the situation. Sikathar's vertical pupils studied Daniel's face. And the smile? Was that part of your strategy too? Daniel laughed. The smile is just me, though I admit, learning how uncomfortable it made some species was interesting. Do you know why many species found it unsettling? Sikathar asked. I gathered it had something to do with showing teeth being threatening for some species. The Vexeri made a negative gesture. It was more than that. Among most Confederation species, facial expressions are reserved for closest family units or intimate settings. Displaying them in public, especially in diplomatic settings, seemed inappropriate, almost naked. And now? Daniel asked. Now many representatives are practicing their own versions of smiling, Sakathar admitted. It's becoming something of a diplomatic fashion. Their conversation was interrupted by Olivia approaching with a datapad. Ambassador, the Drakari envoy's ship has just requested docking permission. They'll arrive in 2 hours. Daniel nodded. Thank you, Olivia. Is the welcome committee ready? Yes, sir. Representatives from 12 species will be present, as requested. After Olivia left, Sikthar's scales rippled with surprise. You're meeting with the Drakari today? Before you leave? One last bit of business, Daniel explained. After their defeat at Nerillion Prime and 3 subsequent failed incursions, they've requested peace talks. This is the first official diplomatic contact. And you arranged this without informing the Transitional Council? Daniel raised an eyebrow. The Council approved it last week. Were the Vexeri not represented at that session? Zekithar's scales darkened slightly. We were between representatives. Due to our own political adjustments, it seems we missed some developments. The old Confederation would have kept such negotiations among the highest categories, Daniel noted. The new approach involves all affected parties. 2 hours later, Daniel stood in the main diplomatic reception hall alongside representatives from species across all former categories. The massive doors slid open to reveal the first-ever Drakari diplomatic delegation to enter Confederation space peacefully. The Drakari were tall, angular beings, with metallic-looking skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. They moved with precision, scanning the room carefully as they entered. Ambassador Krell, the lead Drakari said, addressing Daniel directly. I am Envoy Zor of the Drakari Sovereignty. Ambassador Green, Daniel corrected gently. Of Earth, the Krell-Nath are a different species. The Drakari's eyes blinked in sequence. Our intelligence may be outdated. We were informed that the Krell-Nath led the Confederation. The Confederation has undergone some structural changes, Daniel explained with a smile. All species now have an equal voice. The Drakari delegation seemed unsettled by this information, and even more unsettled by Daniel's smile. The envoy leaned closer to one of his aides and whispered something. Is there a problem, Envoy Zor? Daniel asked, still smiling. Your facial expression, the Drakari said cautiously. In our culture, displaying teeth precedes an attack. Daniel nodded understandingly. For humans, it's called a smile. It can mean many things. Friendship, welcome, pleasure at meeting someone new. And sometimes, added Zikthar unexpectedly from beside Daniel, it means you are facing someone who appears harmless, but is decidedly not. The Drakari envoy looked between them, his metallic features difficult to read. We have much to learn about humans, it seems. Indeed, Daniel agreed, his smile unchanging. That would be wise. Later that evening, at Daniel's farewell reception, Ambassador John Rivera was introduced to the various representatives. Rivera was younger than Daniel, but carried himself with similar confidence and offered the same warm smile to everyone he met. The tradition continues, I see, Zakathar commented as he and Daniel watched Rivera charming a group of diplomats. John will do well here, Daniel said. He understands the importance of building relationships across old boundaries. As the reception continued around them, Zakathar turned to Daniel one last time. In our first meeting, I warned you about smiling. I thought it inappropriate and potentially threatening. I remember, Daniel said. Now I understand why a human smile is genuinely something to fear. The Vexeri continued. Not because it shows aggression, but because it hides so many possibilities. Behind that expression could be friendship, deception, determination, or calculation, and others can never be certain which. Daniel looked across the room where the Drakari envoy was cautiously conversing with Rivera, clearly trying to understand the new human ambassador's friendly expression. That's the beauty of diplomacy, Daniel said. The best moves are the ones that can mean different things to different observers. As Daniel prepared to board the transport back to Earth the next morning, a small gathering of representatives came to see him off. What would have been unthinkable a year ago, species from across all categories standing together, was now commonplace. Will you return to Nexus Prime? Nevi of the Lorani asked. Perhaps someday, Daniel replied. But for now, Earth needs me for new diplomatic assignments. As the transport's doors closed, Daniel offered one last smile to the assembled representatives. Some now smiled back in their species' own way. Others still looked slightly uncomfortable with the expression. But all understood what it had come to symbolize. Behind that simple human gesture had been the quiet determination that had transformed the Confederation. It was a lesson none of them would soon forget. Always be wary of a smiling human diplomat, for you never know what lies behind the smile until it's too late to respond.